Council meeting of October 7. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by representatives from the United Nations Association, the Mid-Peninsula chapter. Come on down.
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Nimrit Gariwal. I am the chapter leader of the United Nations Association.
My name is Ana Lievano, and I am also a chapter leader of the United Nations Association.
I'm Rocio Escueda, and I just joined into the United Nations.
Great.
First of all, thank you everyone for your time, and Madam Mayor and the council members. We appreciate you giving us this opportunity, and it's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about our organization. We are called the United Nations Association Mid-Peninsula, also known as UNA USA. Currently, we have over 20,000 members across the country, and we have more than 200 chapters. Our mission is to support United Nations global goals at a more local level by involving the communities more. On behalf of UN and my team, I would like to thank the City of San Mateo for recognizing and to agreeing to proclaim the 74th anniversary of United Nations. So really thank you for that. And also, I wanted to take this time to invite everybody to our local celebration that's going to be happening on October 26th. Which is a Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Japanese American Community Center, which is also in San Mateo. And this year's theme is climate action, and we're gonna have a lot of distinguished speakers, including a former U.S. Ambassador, Jeff Levine. So I really hope that I see everyone, if not a few of you there. So the easiest way to RSVP is the link at Eventbrite, or you can go to UN/day/2019 eventbrite.com and RSVP there. Again, my team and I are very grateful for your time, and we look forward to engaging more with the City of San Mateo to focus on more United Nations global goal. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we do have a proclamation for you. And I will come down and present it, but let me do a quick read of it. So whereas the United Nations was founded in 1945, and the anniversary of the day on which the UN Charter came into force is observed each year on October 24. And whereas the UN is a global multilateral organization comprised of 193 member states, whereas the United Nations seeks to address and solve some of the world's most pressing challenges related to peace and security, human rights, climate change, sustainable development, food security, and humanitarian and health emergencies. And whereas in 2015, all 193 member states adopted 17 Sustainable Development Goals, also referred to as the Global Goals, to work toward a more just and sustainable future for all. Whereas a recent poll conducted by the Better World campaign in 2019 reveals that American support for the UN is at a 10-year high. And whereas the United Nations Association of the USA is a movement of Americans who believe that our interests and values can best be advanced by supporting the life-saving work of the UN, and whereas the UN Association of the USA has more than 20,000 members across 200 chapters in the United States, and whereas the United Nations Association of the USA has declared Our Planet, Our Future as its theme for the UN Day 2019 in support of the UN's declaration that climate change is the most pressing issue of our time. And whereas the UN Association Mid-Peninsula chapter is committed to taking local action to support global goals and the work of the UN, whereas the UN Association Mid-Peninsula chapter is joining the fight against climate change to ensure a healthier and sustainable future for all. So we're most happy to have your work, especially as it relates to the climate. This council regularly deals with climate issues, and it's wonderful to have community support. So congratulations on United Nations Day.
Thank you.
So let me come down, and we have a proclamation for you. Let's give you that. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Okay. So we have one more ceremonial matter. We have a proclamation related to code enforcement. Ms. Kajayan and your troops, come on up.
Good evening, Mayor Pappen and members of the council. My name is Kawar Kojayan, Community Development Director. Community development is split up into 4 divisions: planning, housing, building, and code enforcement. Tonight, we are celebrating Code Enforcement Officers Appreciation Week, and it's a great opportunity to highlight the great work of and dedication of our code enforcement officers. Under the supervision of Christine Civiletti, the code enforcement officers on a daily basis monitor the public health, welfare, and safety of our community. They enforce multitude of codes, state, environmental regulations throughout the whole city. Each one of these officers manages about 60 cases on an average day basis, and are in the community every single day looking at a wide variety of things. I feel very privileged to oversee code enforcement and the work that they do. They really do a great job of maintaining property values, looking out for the community as a whole, for everybody who lives, works, and plays here. As a commemoration to Code Enforcement Officers Appreciation Week, we have a little slideshow presentation that shows before and after pictures of some code enforcement cases, just to show the community what our code enforcement officers do. I feel very blessed and honored to work with them, and I think it's a great opportunity to celebrate their dedication to the city. That was a drastic one. So as we go through the slideshow, you'll see a wide variety of cases, from property maintenance to nuisance to living conditions that are substandard, that are dealt with on a day-to-day basis. Anything from weeds to trash carts to peeling paint on the exterior of a home, to really substandard living conditions inside a home, mold, areas that are improperly maintained, hoarding, lots of various cases, trash inside and rear yards, that really put the community at jeopardy for a lot of issues that could occur. And that's it. So thank you, code enforcement officers, for all the work you do.
So don't go away. We do have a proclamation for you. Thank you very much for the slideshow. Picture is definitely worth a gajillion words, and they were very enlightening, and we really do thank you for all the difficult work you have to deal with on a daily basis. So whereas the state of California has proclaimed the second week of October as Code Enforcement Officer Appreciation Week, and whereas code enforcement officers provide for the safety, health, and welfare of San Mateo citizens through the enforcement of local, state, and federal laws and ordinances dealing with various issues of building, zoning, housing, animal control, environmental health, and life safety. And whereas code enforcement officers have challenging and demanding roles and often do not receive recognition for the job they do in improving quality of life for residents and businesses of local communities. And whereas the role of many code enforcement officers has expanded in recent years, with jurisdictions increasingly relying on the expertise and training of code enforcement officers in their communities. And whereas code enforcement officers are dedicated, highly qualified, and highly trained professionals who share the goals of preventing neighborhood deterioration, enhancing communities, ensuring safety, and preserving property values through knowledge, training, and application of housing, zoning, and nuisance laws. And whereas code enforcement officers have a highly visible role in the city of San Mateo and regularly interact with the public and a variety of federal, state, county, and local officials in their capacity as code enforcement officers. And whereas the city of San Mateo wants to recognize and honor the code enforcement officers that serve our community and acknowledge their role in leading the way to improve quality of life within our community. And therefore, on behalf of the city of San Mateo, we declare this Code Enforcement Officer Appreciation Week, and we want you to know we very much appreciate all that you do to keep our city safe and healthy. Okay, so we're going to pull the Mayor's Quarterly Hero, but we do have an announcement from our clerk, so I'll let her go ahead and make that announcement.
Well, I wanted to let everybody know that next council meeting, October 21st, is going to be a very special meeting because we're going to have the opportunity to thank Councilmember Maureen Fresquet for her years of service on the City Council. And everyone's invited to come and give her their best wishes and well wishes. And we are going to have a little reception after the council meeting in the atrium. So you're all invited.
I think we sort of look forward to it. With mixed emotions, we look forward to it. How's that? So let's take roll call, and then we will go to the next item.
Okay. Councilmember Rodriguez?
Here.
Councilmember Gothals?
Here.
Councilmember Bonilla?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Fresquet? Here. Mayor Diane Pappen?
Here. All righty, so let's go to the consent calendar. Do we have anybody that wants, any council member pulling anything? No? Anybody, member of the public wish to pull anything?
I don't have any speaker
No
slips for that.
Okay, so we'll go through the consent calendar and then entertain a motion.
Okay. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion. If discussion is desired, that item may be removed and considered separately. Item number 3, the grand jury report, soaring city pension costs, follow up on grand jury report of 2718 response letter. Item 4, credit card service convenience fee update. Item number 5, merit employees salary schedule. Item number 6, classification update, library department. Item number 7, California Library Literacy Services Family Literacy Grant budget appropriation. Item number 8, San Mateo County Measure W funds agreement. Item number 9 and item number 10 are being pulled from this agenda and will come forward to council at a future meeting. So we are not taking any action on item 9 or 10. Item number 11, Basins 2 and 3 Collection System Improvements, Dale Avenue Pump Station Upgrade Contract. Item 12, Wastewater Treatment Plant On-Call Engineering Services Agreement Amendments. Item 13, East San Mateo Sanitary Sewer Lift Station Rehabilitation Project Amendment.
Okay. Do we have a motion for 1 through 8 and 11 through 13?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. So that passes 4-0. Now we will move on to public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the City Council at this time. However, please know that state law prevents council from taking action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff, however, for follow-up. Public comment is limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, an opportunity for additional comment later in the agenda can happen. So, with that, do we have any public comment?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I do. If I could please have Samir and Kevin come up.
Hi, good evening. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Araka-Prombo, a student from San Mateo High School.
And I'm Samir Bupardikar, also a student at San Mateo High School, and we're both co-presidents of the Entrepreneurship Club at our school, and we'd like to discuss a safety concern regarding the exits from our school. When drivers are exiting San Mateo High School via East Poplar Avenue, there's a hazard to student drivers due to low visibility and high traffic. The streets are narrow, and when cars are parked next to the exit, it's difficult to see oncoming traffic due to the parked cars, as you can see in image 2. Additionally, the traffic on the opposing side of the street can make the turn significantly more difficult, as students are pressured to predict the movement of cars they cannot see and merge with traffic. Although there's a traffic light, there's a large distance between the light and the exit, which gives cars a lot of time to reach dangerous speeds.
So East Poplar Avenue connects with the 101 South Highway, where the speed limit is 65 miles per hour. And the speed limit on Poplar is 30 miles per hour, but people getting right off the highway will not always be in the mindset that they're driving on public streets. So as a student driver myself, I'm forced to inch my way into the street. And oftentimes when I'm carpooling with people, I see cars get stuck in the middle of the street, trying to merge at the same time, as well as look out for cars that are coming in. And as you can see in images 3 and 4, due to the parked cars, the visibility is extremely poor. And like 1 second, you might not see any cars coming, but the next second, there will be a car passing right in front of you, which is emphasized in those images. And image 5 gives you a view of the same street from inside a car. So the street has been of concern to student drivers for a while, and we wanted to know who we could talk to work on a solution. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being here. I think I'm going to refer you to our Public Works Director. He'll raise his hand right there, Brad Underwood, and you may want to speak with him.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here. Okay. So let's move on to item number 14, which is Health Right 360 Project, tax-exempt financing. Okay, Ms. Wesley, you're here.
Good evening, Mayor Pappen and council members. I'm Lisa Wesley, Treasury and Debt Manager in the Finance Department. As required by the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, this is a public hearing to adopt a resolution to approve the issuance of tax-exempt revenue bonds by the California Municipal Finance Authority, in which Health Right 360 will benefit. Public notice of this hearing was made on September 5th in the San Mateo Daily Journal. Additionally, this item is to authorize the agreement between the City of San Mateo and the California Municipal Finance Authority. In order for the CMFA to have the authority to serve as issuer of the bonds, it is necessary for the City of San Mateo to become a member of the CMFA. There are no costs associated with the membership with the city, and the city will not be exposed to any financial liability due to its membership with the CMFA. If approved, the CMFA proposes to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $65 million in which approximately $2.9 million will benefit Health Right 360, which is a nonprofit organization with which oversees projects within the city of San Mateo. The $2.9 million will allow Health Right 360 to pay outstanding loans totaling about $700,000, and the remaining $2.2 will be used to renovate and equip 3 substance use treatment facilities located in San Mateo. With that, this ends the presentation of information. In the audience tonight is Travis Cooper, Financial Advisor for the CMFA, and we can entertain any questions that the council may have.
Okay. Any questions of council? Oh, no questions. Okay. Any questions from the public? Madam Clerk, do we have any speaker slips?
No, Madam Mayor, we do not.
Well, seeing as how it promises $2.9 million, do I have a motion?
I'll move that we adopt a resolution to approve the issuance of revenue bonds by the California Municipal Finance Authority for the benefit of Health Right 360, a California nonprofit public benefit corporation.
A second.
To read the whole thing? Is that sufficient?
Staff's recommendation.
Okay, and to approve staff's recommendation.
And I think we have a second from Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes, I didn't hear any no's? No. Passes 5-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we shall move right along to item number 15, general plan update. Ms. Kajayan, welcome back. From about 5 minutes ago. Okay. And Ms. Klein?
Thank you, Mayor Pappen and members of the council. Again, I'm Kohar Kojayan, Community Development Director, and I will be doing the presentation this evening. I have with me Principal Planner and Project Manager for the General Plan Update, Julia Klein, as well as Joanna Jansen from PlaceWorks, who is the principal in charge of our General Plan Update. At the August 19th meeting, the staff presented draft study areas to the City Council. The City Council selected version 1 of the map, however, along with the community expressed concern about the inclusion of some residential neighborhoods. Although the intent was to study those areas for infrastructure and transportation-related improvements holistically, there was still concern expressed by the community on the equity of the study areas presented. Following the council meeting and the community and council feedback, staff from Community Development and the Public Works Departments met and identified various opportunities for study related to transportation, infrastructure, and multimodal access, which could take place concurrently with the general plan update. City staff also coordinated a discussion with the San Mateo County Health Department in their Public Health Policy and Planning Division to discuss outreach strategies as well as studies related to building healthy and equitable communities. And we will be partnering with them as well. These studies will take place concurrently and will be woven into the process. These targeted studies are also directly responsive to the specific concerns we heard from the community and the residents. Within the study areas, currently, there is a substantial amount of land that does not have residential or an open space designation. And as we mentioned on August 19th, we plan to start our analysis on those areas for potential capacity of future growth. Within those zones, we will start with looking at the low-hanging fruit, which we talked about last time, by analyzing data on several criteria, such as properties where the owner has already expressed interest in redevelopment, looking at the value of the land as presented on the property and whether it's equal or greater to the value of the existing improvements, which could point to a higher likelihood of potential redevelopment in the future, or where a significant amount of the property is currently covered by surface parking lots. And as we start looking into and analyzing each one of those parcels, we will be better equipped to make policy decisions on land in San Mateo. So we're currently working on providing an opportunity sites analysis, and this is a screenshot of that analysis for you today. It's not yet complete, but once it is, it will show a wide variety of layers and information on each of the parcels within the study areas identified. So based on the community and council feedback and the identification of these more targeted studies, staff has prepared a version 4 of the study areas map, which eliminates all 1 and 2 family residential areas from initial study. The map includes non-residential parcels, as well as all multifamily zoned parcels for initial study, Keeping in consideration state laws and the upcoming regional housing needs allocation by the state, staff believes it is necessary to provide analysis of these parcels. The intent is to analyze these sites to help inform future decisions. There are no land use decisions being made on these sites for now. It does not necessarily mean that by studying them, we will make land use changes, but we are looking at land use changes or housing alternatives to inform future discussions. Therefore, we recommend that the City Council accept version 4 of the map, confirming that no land use alternatives will be initially considered in 1 and 2 family zoned properties. I'm available to answer any questions, as well as Julia and Joanna as well. This concludes staff's presentation.
Okay. Questions?
I know that we received some communication from Central Neighborhood that we got today, this afternoon, but can you address some of the concerns they brought up?
Sure. Julia is going to address.
So the letter indicated that, and I think maybe we can go to. I'm not sure if you can see this zoomed-in portion of study area 4, but central neighborhood is in this general quadrant.
Julia, can I ask you to speak in the mic and keep your voice way up? Thank you.
So let me try to do this and move the mouse at the same time. Okay, so
Perfect.
central neighborhood is in this quadrant of the city. So it encompasses a portion of downtown, and then the rest of this area is currently not within a study zone. So the comments that were made, and I'm just going to read the letter. We would like to include residential 4th Avenue, south side from El Dorado to South Idaho, 5th Avenue, both sides of from Delaware to South Amplet, and then from South Delaware, west side of 5th Avenue to 9th Avenue. All of these streets, if you look at it, they're not previously identified in any adequate sites for housing element purposes, but they are along this transition zone. And so this is high-density housing in downtown, and this is the boundary for the downtown study area. So we included it for 2 reasons. One, it is near the sites in downtown that are currently on the housing element list for high-density housing, and usually we would like to study this area for transitions from higher density to existing single-family and R2 zones. And so we kept this boundary, which is the boundary for the downtown study area, for that primary reason, so that we would have the chance to look at transition there. Transitioning from higher density and higher height buildings to R1 and R2 properties that are on this on the other side of the boundary line.
And just to confirm, the sites that were identified by Central Neighborhood are all zoned R3 and R4. They are not zoned for 1 and 2 family residences, although they do have currently single-family homes on them. They do allow for higher density housing.
Yes. Rick.
Yeah, looking at the map in version 3 and 4, or 1 and 4 both, I see the historical district in the center there. What is the plan in terms of studying? Is that area getting studied also?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Do we have, I'm going to open up to public comment then. Do we have speakers, Madam Clerk?
I have one speaker slip. If
Okay.
Mike Caggiano can please come
All
forward.
righty. Mr. Caggiano, come on down.
Mike Caggiano, resident of, I guess, an R, whatever, multiple area. But I'm in North Central, and much of that is R1 and R2. I'm more interested in a V5 map, you know, because, I mean, you got 1, 2, 3, 4. I feel every 20 years we're doing a study. The entire city should be in the study. And everyone seems to be dealing with a lot of paranoia that their bucolic residents may somehow be threatened. I personally think, speaking just for myself, that R1 should be something relegated to the last century. There should be no R1. I think any property, freestanding home, should be R2 as of right, and you'll have like an A and a B to your address, because we're all supposed to be looking at increasing housing. Doesn't mean you have to increase entire blocks or what have you, but you need to increase the ability for people to subdivide a home. And I certainly don't see going from R1 to R3, but definitely I think the entire city should be R2 to make it much more easy for people to put a subdivision, an extra entrance, a kitchenette, what have you, and not go through all the monkey motion of ADUs and extra expense. Should be much, much simpler and cheaper to do. While I've still got some time left, I see some of the R1s are very close to even Caltrain tracks, in addition to being up by the pasture land, whatever we call it. I forget the name of that place. Anyway, I personally feel you really got to look with Caltrain to work at eliminating our, again, archaic gates that go up and down. And if we can look at some of the other cities, we've got some very nice grade separations, but I think with 4 crossings within a quarter mile in the downtown, everyone's avoided this like the plague. And I honestly think you need a raised open trestle for that entire area, get rid of all of those gates, utilize the area underneath the trestle for parking, and just bite the bullet. Because, I mean, this thing should have been eliminated 60 years ago. And it's astounding that we're still not really getting serious about it. Everyone just dances and slides all around this issue, but it's not pleasant. I'm sure but you see it in Europe, you see it all around the world. It's not the entire town, but the area where you could eliminate a great number of those grade crossings in one fell swoop, and that's the only way to go about it. And that would be hopefully part of this study going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think you got a few more slips since we last talked.
I do have 7 more speakers now.
Okay.
Next speaker is Leora Ross, followed by Robert Whitehair, and then Adam Nugent. We'd ask you to come down to this side so you can come up to the lectern very quickly. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Leora Ross. I'm here on behalf of the Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County. I wanted to start by thanking staff for all the work that you've done. It's obvious that you've listened to the North Central residents, so thank you very much. We are concerned that there still is residential slated for study in this final map. We acknowledge that people living in R3 and R4 are the most vulnerable to displacement. So we urge you to listen to the entire city as you move forward, and we look forward to the rest of the general plan process with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next speaker is Robert Whitehair, followed by Adam Nugent, and then Nancy Schneider.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, I want to thank you again for all the work you've done over the last year and that of staff. About a year ago, I would say at best, the process was slow. And that last year, it's really turned around thanks to the council, thanks to staff. I really appreciate what everybody's done. I want to continue to study this, and I want to have study areas. Study areas, that's risky, but it's the right thing to do. And I appreciate you doing the study areas, and I want you to continue to do them. I think we and my friends and the rest of San Mateo are very interested in doing what's right for San Mateo for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next speaker is Adam Nugent, followed by Nancy Schneider, and then Adam Lorraine.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Pappen. I want to express thanks first to the staff for communicating and working on this new map and listening to many of the things that North Central has come out about. I also want to express thanks to Eric Rodriguez for giving me a call. You know, this is the first stage of our general plan process, and I want to appreciate the process of looking at what our capacity is in these sites. I do know that the city is now legally obligated to affirmatively further fair housing in its next housing element, and I want to make sure that our goals for that are very clear to the citizens and residents of our whole city, so that we understand what that means for San Mateo. Sites that are currently included in the city's adopted housing element, that makes sense to be studied. To echo what Leora said, we really shouldn't be, saying, oh, one type of R versus another type of R is worthy of study versus not, or should be protected over one other. We need to be treating residential areas with equity, and that does impact, who has been able to live in areas in the past and our history of that. And so going forward, it's important that we try to further not only sustainability goals, meet our housing needs brought forth from the state and also just given to us by our current economic situation. It's also important that we create a San Mateo that is living up to its vision statement, and I have hope for that. I also want to note that Handsome's position is a little bit off of what is said in the staff report, but you guys are doing a valiant job, so I'm not going to nitpick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is Nancy Schneider, followed by Adam Lorraine, and then Diane Pettit.
Hey, my name is Nancy Schneider, and I'm a longtime San Mateo resident. And I also want to thank all the staff for all the work you've done. I'm also a member of the Sustainable Land Use Committee of the Loma Prieta chapter of the Sierra Club. And we wrote a letter, our chairs wrote a letter to the Planning Commission in July, which I'm not sure ever got to the council. So I actually, rather late, emailed it to the council so that you'd get a chance to see it, and I'm not going to read it or anything to you now. But the couple of things that we had stressed was that we need to increase density around transit corridors and transit nodes like our stations and keep that in consideration. And also that we need to consider the missing middle, which are duplexes and triplexes, so that we can get get more housing in lots of areas. And I hope you get a chance to read our letter. And I appreciate that now that North Central, which is no longer been the only neighborhood that was included, but I do think it's rather short-sighted to take out all R1 and R2 neighborhoods and areas, because that's most of the city, and we really need to look at everywhere, and we do need to think about getting higher density, not huge density. The missing middle is 1 or 2 units, 3 units at a chance, and it works pretty well. There are examples in the letter that I emailed to you. Also, because we can't think about that we can keep things exactly the way that they are now. With the climate crisis and everything else, we can't do what we've been doing. People have to figure out a way to not use fossil fuels, and higher density makes transit easier. It also makes things more walkable. So I want you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Adam Lorraine, followed by Diane Pettit, and then Esmeralda Cabrera.
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Adam Lorraine. I'm a 20-ish year resident of San Mateo. I'm feeling very well, and I'm very glad to be here. Thanks. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'll admit that while I haven't been as much in the loop as I would have liked to have been through the updates on this process, I took a look and would like to give a quick high-level thought from a 20-ish year resident, especially given what's transpired since the last meeting. I, first of all, do want to echo those comments that have appreciated staff's flexibility and interest and responsiveness to community concerns related to the last map. And I appreciate that the council and staff and the subcommittee and everyone who's moving forward in this process is trying to find the right balance. You're getting comments from a number of different members of our community with many differing views. And there are some particularly nuanced views. Indeed, this is a complex issue. I guess I just felt that this current map, as I think it was echoed with a couple of other public comments, so I won't go too deep into the weeds here, but overall it feels to me that instead of asking more of our community to take part in what could be a large change as we look toward the future and the challenges that we face, I think we're asking less of our community to put some skin in the game with this current map. And so if as staff mentioned, it seems we might be able to address our immediate concerns with the current areas in the map. I'm just a bit concerned, firstly, that those areas might experience more dramatic change as a result because, of course, there's smaller areas overall in our city. And I just hope that indeed that ends up being the case. But I feel like every year when we read about climate change and what we're going to need to do to ensure that we have a high quality of life in our city, I feel like the challenges are getting more difficult. The bar is getting higher. And so to constrict the study areas feels like it might be a step back. But I do appreciate that we're not necessarily asking one particular neighborhood to bear the majority of a burden here. And indeed, I look forward to the future of the process. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Diane Pettit, followed by Esmeralda Cabrera.
I want to thank everybody for putting all of your efforts into this, okay? I do live currently at 221 South Fremont Street, 3rd Avenue. I am the last street that borders 5th Avenue, up to 3rd to 5th. However, in 2005 to 2007, I did live at 810 East 5th Avenue in a duplex. I do know that this area is Section 8. Much of this area is Section 8. I do know that the people who live there are teachers. In fact, there's a teacher who lives on 5th Avenue who teaches in Belmont. And I worked with her in 1987. I've known her for almost 25 years. I also know that there's a contractor that lives in that area who helps people upgrade their homes, and he has 2 high school students. I know the neighborhood very well. I want you to, I know we've discussed this, I'm also part of HANS-Me, I'm part of Gateway Association, and would like, because I am the traffic action plan person who goes to those neighborhoods and talks to people about the traffic. And those 2 young men that came up, that's an issue on our wish list for better traffic. I just say that the townhomes that are against Bayshore right now was a great addition to helping people be affordable, okay? In our area, our property taxes don't go up. Our property, what our properties are worth don't go up as fast as everybody else's on the other side, okay, on the west side, Aragon, Baywood. And for that reason, when we want to remodel our homes or, add another bedroom, it's less affordable for somebody who does a minimum income of about $60,000. I'd say 80 if you're a teacher and a firefighter, let's say, together. But I also know that there are babysitting services in there that we all use. And there's a lot of babysitting services in those areas. My other concern is, and this is on my wish list, I don't think it can really be done, but we had the engineer come who talked about the new bicycle path along North San Mateo Drive up to Burlingame, okay? We were kind of wishing for something like that on 3rd Avenue, some access to the kids going to Gateway Park. I just would like a real plan. Let's not talk about what area is going to be allowed to build 5-story condos and such and so forth. Let's get a real plan what the street is going to look like, what streets are going to look like, what vehicles are going to be allowed to travel down those streets to get to downtown. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for all of your help.
Thank you so much.
And Esmeralda Cabrera.
Good evening. My name is Esmeralda Cabrera. Thanks for hearing my thoughts today. And thanks for the work you're doing too. I've been part of some of the general plan meetings, and it's been really interesting to meet members of my community. I was born and raised here in San Mateo. I love it here. I love our community, and that's why I'm going to share this with you. So I am a lifelong San Mateo resident, raised in North Central. I was also raised by this city we call San Mateo. I was the child of a busing system that chose integration but not housing inclusion. I'm the child of the legacy of redlining and zoning laws that made sure we stayed on the east of everywhere, something that folks from the west side didn't need to experience because of their access to the west side's disproportionate generational wealth that can accumulate from living in the right place. I was the child of the lower San Mateo Creek, covered over, diverted, fenced off, while those on the upper creek could enjoy its water and banks more unrestrained. But I have also been a child raised steep in an area renowned for its cultural and ecological diversity and conviviality. This is a community that has role modeled reflection on its past and compassion in the present. If this city wishes to proceed as a forward-thinking, culturally and economically diverse and sustainable community, it must reconsider whether it will keep walking on eggshells around the more wealthy and economically insulated communities, or demand that the planning of a sustainable future includes all communities. The community of North Central has historically borne more than its fair share, so I urge you to examine any biases that you may have that would unwittingly perpetuate the imbalance of burden on already vulnerable and impacted communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you to all our speakers. We'll bring it back to the council. You are looking for approval from us, is that right, to adopt V4 as the map that will include the study areas, right?
Correct.
And again, these are just study areas for now that might be the low-hanging fruit of where we could tolerate some maybe higher density or higher heights, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to bring it back to the council. I think Councilmember Rodriguez. Oh, you have a question. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just hoping you can talk a little bit more about keeping the R3 and R4s in North Central on the map and your reasoning behind that. And also I wanted to see if there was kind of a different designation that we could have for that. It's not necessarily for upzoning or anything like that, but it's more of kind of what I think the intent is that I've heard from you is in more of preventing displacement and in increasing resources and health, safety, transportation, things like that.
Sure. So there are a couple things, actually a variety of things. First, we included all multi-residential zone properties, R3, R4, R5, R6, TOD areas that allow multi-residential, and they were included for multiple reasons, and we went back and forth on this. The first being that there are several unit properties that are included in our existing housing element as opportunity sites, as sites identified for residential. And in order for us to examine those properties for the next upcoming housing element, we do need to include them in the study areas. The new state laws have require that they're going to be very strict, more stringent on what can and cannot be included as sites to be included in the housing element. And in order to include sites that were previously used, they do have to allow by right zoning and a wide variety of other things, including what Adam Nugent mentioned about affirmatively furthering fair housing. So there's a wide variety of reasons why we need to study these sites. We need to understand what's going on each site, various factors of those sites. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will change anything on them, but we do need to understand what's happening with the existing conditions of the properties. That's number one. Number two, housing does need to go somewhere. We are going to grow, and the part of this process is figuring out where that growth needs to go. So by taking all residential off the map and just focusing on commercial properties, we're looking at commercial displacement, a different kind of displacement. Where will people go to the dry cleaner? if everything is redeveloped. So I do think we need to consider a wide variety of options, and all we're doing now is considering those options. We're not taking a look at what is going to exactly happen. We're going to look at the trade-offs and what decisions we need to make in the future, and in order to do so, we need to understand the site circumstances and what it means to do something on parcel A, and what does that mean to parcel B. We just don't know that yet.
So I think from the difference between the last meeting and this meeting, there's some kind of unintended consequences of the maps and how they appeared in public. And I think that I want to try to prevent that from happening again. And I'm just wondering, is there any way, is there just anything we can do here at this point, at this early point, that can reassure the North Central community that these particular areas are going to be handled with a special care, looking towards preventing displacement and all of the concerns that they're bringing forward?
So the R3 and R4 properties are scattered throughout the study areas. We could take a look, and we can probably bring up a zoning layer to show where those are. So we could add the R3 and R4 in what's excluded, if that's what the council desires to study. I would not want to do it just for North Central because those properties are scattered throughout the city.
But is there anything other than that we could do by designating them a different type of area, or some assurances, or could it be just from assurances from this council that what our intent there is not to upzone completely and have all this displacement, but we're really going to be taking that as a top priority with every lens that we're looking at this with? I mean, is it?
Sure, I think we could do that by minute order, can we? I think we could do that by minute order, if that's what the council desires to do.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions and comments?
Comments?
Mm-hmm.
Go.
Sure.
More questions? Okay. So I fully support the version 4 of the map. I think that that's the right thing to do. I feel strongly that all neighborhoods should be treated equally, and I definitely do not feel that one neighborhood should feel the burden of alone addressing our housing crisis within their R1 and R2 zones. And I don't believe that was ever the intent of this council or staff, but I think that the important thing is by approving study map 4, I think that we're making those intentions clear. I want to thank staff as well for being very attentive and for their swift response in turning this around. And I also want to thank the leaders in the North Central community, Handsome, for raising these concerns and working with staff to get them addressed. I do wish there were, I would like to take some further step tonight to assure the residents of North Central or reassure them that we are not interested, or that we're going to be very careful about displacement. That's going to be, at least with this study zone for me, it's going to be the first thing I'm going to be looking at before we make any changes there in R3 and R4. That's about it. I look forward to moving on after this, moving forward in the general plan update process with this continued spirit of collaboration.
Great. Anyone else want to go? I think we've shown some flexibility and nimbleness, if that's a word. And I appreciate the concerns that came in from North Central, and I concur with Councilmember Rodriguez. That was not the intent to cause that concern. I thought I was pretty clear that that was not why we were going to study the area, but what I'm hearing is those concerns have been addressed, or the fears have been allayed. Let's get to studying these areas. Again, they are just study areas, and we're going to start where we think we might have some tolerance for additional housing. I'm perfectly okay to modify the proposal a bit to say displacement is something that's going to be at the forefront of our concerns as we look at R3s. Those are all the remarks I have. Do we have further remarks?
I would concur. I think we need to give this map a chance. I appreciate staff for the work you've done. I do agree that some kind of modification would be good. I think to assure North Central, but probably Central neighborhood as well, because I think they had some of the same concerns about displacement. And so we want to make sure that we take that into consideration. So if I don't know if there's other comments, I'd be ready to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Okay, so.
I just wanted to add, that, of course, as everybody knows, the last meeting, I had many different feelings about all this. Although I did see, the decision made by my fellow council members. And I heard lots of back and forth amongst the public. I'm glad to see here tonight that the public seems to be somewhat in support of where we're going here tonight, and that makes me feel better about all this. And it seems like we're able to actually decide on some areas to focus on and get a study going. And I think that's going to be good progress. Absolutely. So that said, I as far as I can, I support what we're doing tonight.
Terrific, thank you.
All right.
So we'll entertain a motion.
Okay, that we consider and accept clarifications that update the study area boundaries, map V4, including eliminating 1 and 2 family residentially zoned parcels citywide from study areas with the addition of a modification to address potential displacement for R3 and R4. Is that adequate?
We have a second?
Second.
All right. So all those in favor of the motion as posed?
I'm not sure we need a motion for this. Do we need a motion for this?
We have to adopt
Okay.
this map, for
Okay.
sure.
Sure, go ahead.
So all those,
Yeah.
Oh, we don't
Right.
need a motion?
you don't need a motion?
Just a
you need
verbal,
direction?
just a verbal acceptance and direction is
Right. And I
fantastic.
think you got it. Yeah.
Yep.
How about it?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next item, which is item 15. Is that right? Where are we? Oh, excuse me, item 16, San Mateo Downtown Parking Technology Project Agreement, Alternative Purchasing. Is that where we are? Something like that.
Good evening, Mayor Pappen and City Council members. Sue Ellen Atkinson, Principal Transportation Planner with Public Works. Sorry. There we go. All right, here tonight with the San Mateo Downtown Parking Technology Project, award for construction contract. So we wanted to take a moment to refresh council on this project. In 2015, the City of San Mateo was awarded a grant under the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's Climate Initiatives Grant Program. The city was awarded $1.5 million in grant funding and also had a $500,000 city match. We later added $500,000 of CMAQ funding, which is congestion management and air quality funding that the city had from a prior project, for a total project budget of $2.5 million. Design for this project was completed in 2017. The components of the project are new pay stations and parking meters in downtown San Mateo, real-time parking occupancy for downtown garages, new signage. Right now, our signage in downtown is a bit of a mishmash. So this design project included parking wayfinding and a parking brand for the city. So it would be immediately clear what parking lots and parking garages are city-owned, where it may not be today. So this project would put in static directional signage, which is essentially just signs that are on posts that direct folks to parking, and then dynamic signage at our parking garages that would indicate the real-time occupancy and availability at garages, so people know if there's parking available and how much parking is available. And the project also includes a parking management system that is very exciting for staff because we'll be able to manage the pay stations and parking meters off-site. Right now, we do have some equipment that we have to have our contractor manually change. So when we change pay rates or if we have a parking holiday, they have to manually do that. And having a parking management system enables us to do that from our computers. So just a few visuals on what this downtown parking experience will look like once this project wraps up. Through the design, we came up with clear branding for city-owned parking with a color palette and text, very crisp and legible directional signage that immediately identifies parking as city-owned. New signage for our surface lots, and then the real-time dynamic signage that's attached to our downtown garages to indicate the number of spaces available. That parking availability would also be available through third-party apps, so we can get information to people on their phones or smart devices about where parking's available. These two devices are also very exciting. The project includes replacement of all of our pay stations and single-space parking meters. To replace all of the infrastructure that's currently downtown. We know that some of our pay stations are in states of disrepair, and we try our best to keep them functional, but this will give us the opportunity to have equipment that's really top of the line. All of the pay stations and meters will accept cash, credit, and mobile payment, which is an improvement from where we are today. They'll offer easy integration for our parking enforcement staff, and a parking management platform for city staff, as previously mentioned. So tonight's staff recommendation is to approve an agreement with IPS Group, Inc. for construction of parking technology improvements for the San Mateo Downtown Parking Technology Project in the amount of $1,459,404.85. Establish a contingency reserve in the amount of $218,910.73, and authorize the Public Works Director to execute the agreement in substantially the form presented and issue change orders within the contingency amount. That concludes the staff presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
I have one quick question, and that is, how many of the single station meters or single space meters, are you just replacing like for like? Or are you adding, subtracting? What are you doing?
We are intending to replace like for like. Okay. This project is federally funded. The grant is federal monies, and so we're required to keep trenching to a minimum and not disturb the native soil. So digging down for new posts or removing posts would not reach that objective.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I have just a few questions. Will these show, when you go into a parking garage, spaces by row? Or will it just say, like, for example, down at Valley Fair, I love going into their parking garage because it'll say there are 3 spaces available in this row, so you know you can go down there and find a space. Will it be that advanced?
Under the base bid, it's occupancy by facility. So you'll know that there are a certain number of spaces available in each facility, but it's not by row and it's not by parking level.
Okay. And the stations on the street, I know the current ones we have are very difficult to read in the sunlight. Are these designed to be easy to read?
They are. They have very legible screens, and they also offer the option of other languages as necessary.
Okay, and the final question, can people use their smartphones to add more time to their parking if it's allowed, if they're still within the limits?
We have included mobile payment for all of the pay stations, and I believe that we can allow additional time as long as you're within the restriction where you park. So we have 3-hour parking, we have 10-hour parking. So as long as you're within that time frame, you should be allowed to add more time.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Bonilla.
Thank you. I have a few questions. I read the entire report, and I was curious. It looks like we went out to bid 3 different times, and finally on the 3rd time we managed to get 2 bids. And so I was wondering, when I look at the 2 bids, I see that they're split between domestic materials and foreign materials, and I understand that. But I see that the IPS group with foreign materials dropped significantly, about $600,000. The Suarez and Munoz construction didn't drop at all, right? Which tells me they must have made a mistake and didn't understand what they were bidding. Otherwise, their price would have been different based on foreign materials. So I'd like to ask, given that, it seems to me we only actually got one responsive bid. Is that correct? I mean, does that thinking make any sense to you?
From my understanding, the second bidder did not have pricing for foreign materials, so they utilized the same pricing for both. Their products were made with domestic materials or some
The bid
some
summary
such.
shows two different bids from
Understood.
each one. Right? And yet Suarez and Munoz came up with even under the foreign materials with the same number.
Mhm.
So I think there was something wrong with the bid, number one. Number two, why the 15% contingency? Normally we have a 10%.
Understood. This is a different type of project than we typically do in Public Works. It's the first parking technology project that we've done, so we wanted to assure that we had enough in case of unforeseens.
Okay. Yeah, those are my questions for now. I'll have comments later.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Just want to make sure those stands will be eye level.
Madam Mayor, if I could.
Whose eye? My eye level, but of course. Listen, I've got my share of tickets downtown. I'm hoping that I can change my behavior with this ease of payment. Okay, yes, Public Works.
If I add something, you're going to have to remember your license plate, because this will be pay by plate instead of pay by space. So just so you know that, and there'll be a lot of education about that once these are rolled out, so that people know what to do. If you're like me, you got to take a picture of your plate and then walk to the stand and remember that. So
Well, that's comforting.
yeah. So
Good reason to pay for a personalized one.
But that makes it easier. That makes it easier for enforcement as well.
Got it. Interesting. Any other questions? Do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay. With that, I appreciate your questions about the bidding, but are we prepared to go forward?
I have some comments.
Oh, comments. Okay, go
Yes.
ahead, please.
Thank you. So, given the things that I questioned earlier,
Yeah.
and the fact that between the two bids, if you look at the staff report here, you see that the difference, the spread between the two bidders is huge, right? It's more than double on the domestic materials. It's more than double. And so it's really my contention that we don't have a real at least two bidder project here, because the one bidder, Suarez and Munoz, they're clearly way off. Something's wrong, okay? And I don't, I mean, if somebody would have contacted them and pointed out, did we contact them after the bid and say, look, these are your numbers, they're both the same, there should be a difference here, what's your response?
No, the bids that were submitted were the ones that the evaluation was based off of.
Okay, so the only one you called to ask if they really wanted the job was IPS Group, because they were the low bidder?
We don't call anyone to ask if they want the job. It's a low bid project.
Right. Yeah, usually give them a chance to look and make sure they didn't make a mistake. At least when I was turning in public bids, that's the way it worked.
Can I just ask for clarification? Because I looked at the difference there and I thought, that's just huge. So I actually looked up IPS Group, and they are in the business of doing smart meters. And then I looked up Suarez, and it looked, I didn't see anything on their site about that. I just saw they're a construction firm, which then made sense to me that perhaps they bid on it without really understanding the scope, unless you're aware of some work but I couldn't find anything on their site that said they had done this before. So that was an assumption I arrived at, and I'm not sure if that was a correct assumption.
To my knowledge, they're a general contractor, so they bid as the contractor for the project and would need to purchase all of the materials. So it's possible that there was a markup or something like that. Suarez had contacted us regarding the project with a bid protest and mentioned nothing of any errors on their part regarding their pricing.
Thanks. If I may, Madam Mayor?
Sure.
Yeah, well, even if they don't protest this, I do, because I think there's a mistake. There's only one bid where they, I think, actually made a fair effort to come up with real prices, and the other one is clearly just some kind of a mistake. I don't believe that this represents a real responsive bid, and I think there's something wrong with this, and I think we should actually reject this bid and put the thing out for bid again. We need to have at least two good responsive bidders. It'd be better to have three. And I don't know, why are we having such difficulty finding bidders anyway for this? Do we know?
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure why we have a difficulty finding bidders on the project, but we really only need one responsive bidder on a bid like this, which we do have. I don't know why they bid the same amount. Maybe they didn't have information on a non-Buy America or didn't want to put the effort in. I don't know. You know, that could be the case as well. And again, we bid this project 3 times already, so that they were part of those other bid efforts, I believe. No, they were not. So, you know, maybe they were just trying to get, you know, hoping nobody else would bid and get the bid that way. You know, it's hard to know without talking to them.
Is it possible there could have been something wrong with our request for proposals that most contractors looked at and said, I'm not even going to touch this?
I think we had altered it every time, each time, so I think we were pretty solid on the request for proposals this last time.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure it's our role to hypothesize why. In order to be fair in the competitive bid process, as I understand it, you take them. It's like if you miss the deadline, let's just say, and you say, "Oh, I knew that this contractor really wanted to bid on it." You can't alter the deadline, and in a way, we would be altering the deadline to find out why your numbers are what they are. And I'm not. I think in the competitive process, you can do that. I mean,
So,
my experience.
one last comment.
The old days wasn't.
My concern is not so much over the price, it's over the qualifications of the contractor. I'm afraid we're going to end up with somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing. I don't know. I can't support that right now with any facts. I don't know this company's history, but something looks suspicious here, and that's all I'm saying.
I see.
Thanks.
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. I mean, I'll take Councilmember Freskett's investigative skills on that one. But you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, it's not like this the first time we've done this. This is our 3rd time that we've done this, and I don't think it's our responsibility to make sure that these contractors know how to put a bid together. And if they don't know how to put a bid together, do we really want them putting installing our traffic meters? So I think personally that if we have a firm that has this on their website and they specialize in it, and we've tried it 3 times, and these are the only people that have replied, and somebody else that replied can't put a bid together, I think we're very lucky that they replied, and I think we should approve it.
Okay.
I have a motion that we accept the recommendation to staff and go with this bidder.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
All those abstaining? Okay, that motion passes 4-1. We will move on to the next item, which is our last item, and that is item 17. It's new business, and it relates to citywide community services update. So let's see. You must be Dr. McClarney, I presume? Samantha Weigel. Okay, welcome to both of you. Take it away.
Good evening, Mayor Pappen and members of the City Council. My name is Samantha Weigel. I'm the Communications Analyst with the City Manager's Office. I'm here tonight to provide an informational update about San Mateo's community survey and introduce you to the city's consultant on the project, True North Research. In our ongoing efforts to engage the public and be responsive to community interests, the city has decided to issue a community satisfaction survey. We hope this first survey will serve as a benchmark for future surveys. We've also heard from both members of the City Council and the community an interest in incorporating some policy-related questions to help inform the general plan update process. In July 2019, the city issued a request for proposals and received 11 very competitive responses. After an interdepartmental team of staff reviewed the proposals, the city selected True North Research based in part on their extensive experience with municipalities in California. Tonight, we have Dr. Timothy McLarney, president of True North Research, who will talk about the methodology behind the statistically reliable survey and provide an overview of the process, as well as general themes. I do want to note that we're still in the early stages, and tonight's presentation is to provide a high-level overview of the project and next steps. Dr. McLarney will be able to answer any questions after his presentation.
Thank you, Samantha. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Tim McLarney with True North Research, and wanted to take this opportunity tonight to give you a brief introduction to us and kind of who we are and what we do, but also talk a bit about the research process that we're going to be heading down over the next few months with the city. Talk a bit about the methodology for the survey and the types of topics that these surveys tend to address. And I welcome questions from council as I go or at the end, whichever is your preference, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
So a little bit about us first. We are a firm that for the last 20 years has specialized in working with public agencies, but cities in particular, in using surveys to develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers that they serve. My business partner and I have chosen to keep our firm as a two-person firm. And as a team, we have designed and conducted over 1,000 research studies during our careers. About 300 of those studies are what we call sort of resident satisfaction / service planning surveys for cities, where the topics vary but tend to focus on how well the city's performing and meeting residents' needs in a variety of service and facility areas. But also not just how are we doing today, but looking out into the future, thinking a little bit about planning topics. So oftentimes these surveys will help inform a general plan update or master planning process of some sort. Naturally, as you do that type of work, you encounter public agencies where if residents' desires for services and facilities exceed a city's ability to provide those due to revenue, we have agencies that will work with us to look at the feasibility of a revenue measure, right? Is it feasible to move forward with some type of future bond or tax measure? And if it is feasible, how would you go about structuring that measure in a way that it's consistent with the type of measure your community would support? To date, we've done a little over 350 of those. We've helped raise about $32 billion in voter-approved measures. And one of the things I'm very proud of is if you go back to 2008, over the last 10 years, and I always go back to 2008 because that's when the world changed, right? With the Great Recession, money didn't grow on trees, we all discovered. And during that period, it became a lot more difficult for the obvious reasons to pass tax measures. We've been able to maintain the highest success rate, verifiable success rate in the state of California for measures that we recommend go to ballot on our research, and that's 97% overall. So that's a little bit about us. Let's talk a little bit about the methodology for the upcoming survey, and that's just a fancy word for how it is we're going to go about conducting this study. Having been in this field as long as I have, I remember an era that I call the golden era of the telephone survey, right? And it was wonderful, and that's when everybody had a landline, phones used to be attached to the wall, and nobody had caller ID, right? And so the way you do these surveys, you choose phone numbers from at random from the list of phone numbers that served a city, and by extension, you would have essentially a random sample of households. Obviously, a lot has changed. Everybody has caller ID, for starters. Not many people have landlines, and so although we still do surveys by telephone, both landline and mobile, we also realize that there are other ways people like to participate in these types of studies, and so we don't just recruit using telephone and do data collection by telephone. We use what's called a mixed method approach, where we're also recruiting using other methods, email being one of them, mailed letters being the other. So we actually use 3 recruiting methods, right, not just one, and then we allow individuals to participate in the study either by telephone or online at a password-protected website. The reason we password protect it is that it ensures that only individuals who we have sampled and invited to take the survey can access the site, and they are allowed to take it one time, right? If they stop in the middle, they can come back and pick up where they left off, but when they are done with their survey, that PIN or password is no longer valid. And the reason for that is, in today's day and age with Nextdoor and Facebook and everything else, I mean, oftentimes you'll say, hey, I got this great invitation from the survey, and you blast it out and expect everybody else to be able to access the site. We don't want that to happen because that destroys the integrity of our sampling design, and so we make sure we protect everything. We are using what's called a stratified random sample, where we basically start with the residential address as the unit. We no longer choose phone numbers at random. We actually start with the physical address, and we stratify by geography. And then once we've randomly selected our households to start with, we can start appending contact information. So in addition to physical address or mailing address, we've got phone numbers as well as emails that we can append and go from there. In terms of a sample size, we're recommending 600 for your community. That's more than you need to meet the academic standard for statistical reliability. You would need about 400 to be able to do that. But oftentimes, when you get these types of studies, you're not just interested in looking at the overall picture. You like to be able to have a sense of how the results break down by different subgroups of residents. And so having a little larger sample is going to improve the overall reliability of those subgroup analyses. But you have roughly 85,000, if I did my math right earlier today, about 85,000 adult residents in the community. And because this will be a random sampling of those and not a census of all of them, it will have what's known as a margin of error due to sampling. And in this case, it's about plus or minus 4%. And what that means is we can be 95% confident that the results we'll talk about when I bring the results back are within plus or minus 4% of what we would have found had we spoken with all adult residents in the community. So highly reliable. This graphic kind of lets you know how this process is going to unfold. And what you see is over on the far left of this project initiation, that very first little dot, that's pretty much where we are today, right? This was the first day of the study. I had a chance to meet with staff today and talk about some topics and talk a little more about research methodology. But from here, we're going to work on designing the study and get to a point where in probably 2-3 weeks from now, we'll have a questionnaire that we think is final and ready to field. We usually take about, in this case, I'm doing about 3 weeks to 4 weeks in terms of actually programming, testing, language translation, training the interviewers, getting ready, and then going out and recruiting through mail, email, and phone, as we talked about, conducting the surveys, both online and telephone, and we monitor that whole process. Once we are out of the field, we usually need about another 10 days to process the data, and we have what's called a top-line summary, which is sort of our first deliverable in terms of the results, as well as crosstabs. And then we move into a deeper analysis of the data, prepare a full report, as well as a PowerPoint summary of that, which tends to be very graphic-oriented. And then we come back to council and present our findings. So that whole process, front to back's about 2 months, roughly. Give or take a little wiggle room. We do have some holidays coming up that we want to be careful about and avoid interviewing in the middle of. But that gives you a sense of sort of how this all tends to unfold. Now, today we met to talk about topics, but I had actually prepared this slide in advance of today's meeting, but I think it's pretty close to what we're thinking about doing at this point. You know, we'd like to open up these surveys kind of talking about quality of life, right? And understanding how they view the quality of life in the community. What are the things that if they could preserve for the future, they would most like to preserve for the future? If they could change something about San Mateo to make it a better place to live, what change would that be? A lot of these, we have some good open-ended opportunities early in the survey so that they're not having to choose from a list of things that we have provided to them, that they have an opportunity to just tell us in their own words how they feel about the community and what the issues are that are important to them, and when they think about the future, any changes they'd like to see. Naturally, as part of the study, we like to see how they view the city's performance in providing municipal services, both overall as well as in some key areas. These questions at the outset also tend to be very good sort of performance metrics that you can measure off into time, right? We have some cities that we've worked with for 20 years, and every 2 years, like clockwork, they do these studies. And what's neat about it is they have, as you continue to do this, the study gets richer and richer. You're not only able to see where you are today, you get to look back and see where you were 2 years ago, right, and 4 years ago, and 6 years ago. And so we'll purposely design a lot of these questions so that they, although this is your baseline study, you'd have an opportunity to repeat some of those questions in the future. And then there are other questions that tend to be more timely, more, they're dynamic, or it's what I would call sort of modular sections of the survey. You're dealing with issues that you have today, but that 2 years from now, you may not have. So the general plan is a good example of that, right? You have a general plan update that you're working through. We'd anticipate some questions in there that would help inform that general plan update. In particular, I understand building heights and densities is a hot topic. I'm sure we're going to be weighing in on that and trying to gauge in a very neutral and reliable way opinions on those issues. It's also an opportunity to look at communication engagement. This is one area I can tell you that has changed a ton over the last 5-6 years. It's like the ground's constantly moving beneath your feet in terms of where people are getting their information and how they prefer to be communicated to. We had as an option possibly including a question about sort of an initial sort of finger in the wind about a potential revenue measure. I think though, given some of the other topics that we're trying to address here, my guess is that one's probably going to be put off to that future survey. I don't think that we're going to get into it at this cycle, just simply because there's a lot of other ground we want to cover. And then obviously it's also an opportunity for us to gather some up-to-date information about community characteristics and demographics. So in terms of next steps, I mentioned we held the kickoff meeting today. I think over the next few weeks, as that graphic showed, we'll be working on designing the survey instrument and refining it. The plan is to launch this survey in the coming months, and what I would imagine probably a month and a half from now, and then return to council at a future council meeting to present the results. And then that follow-up revenue measure survey is, we're thinking more like Q1 of 2020. So that's the end of my presentation. I certainly welcome questions from council if there are any.
Can I start with, how is this different from your general revenue surveys that you're looking at? In those situations, I would imagine that you're looking just at the likely voters.
Yeah, so a couple of the differences
That's
here.
a much smaller sample size?
Yeah, so in a community survey where you're dealing with sort of overall city services as well as a general plan update, we tend to cast the net widely and all adults are eligible to participate in those surveys, right? For a revenue measure survey, you always want to be thinking about, at the end of the day, who's going to be deciding that? And it's not just registered voters, it's what we call likely voters. In your case, if you were to do a general tax measure, for example, that would be slated for a November 2020 ballot, right? Because general taxes have to appear on the same ballots as regularly scheduled council meetings or council elections. And so we would be looking at your likely November 2020 voter. The reality is the likely November 2020 voter is just about every voter has a pulse in this upcoming November 2020 election. I mean, if you're not interested enough in politics to show up next November, you're not interested in politics, right? And so that's a very large swath of your registered voters.
Still probably only half of those adults, though.
A little more probably, but yes, it's not everybody. So if you think about it, think about sort of layers in an onion, right? If the onion is your entire population, you peel off the folks under 18, now you got adults. Peel off another layer, you get your registered voters. Peel off another layer, you got your likely Novembers. March 2020, for example, that's coming up. That's going to be a very high turnout for a primary election, but it's still not going to have the turnout that November is going to have.
For this, you're looking at adults in San Mateo, 85,000?
Correct, as your sort of universe.
Okay. Another question I had was regarding how open-ended you're going to make this. One of my concerns was we're in a housing crisis. We know that we have to add housing. Our RENA numbers are going to come out. The question of are we going to build housing or not is not really a question that I want to see us pose to our residents. The question is really, how are we going to build housing? How are we going to meet our RENA numbers? Where are we going to put it? Do residents want us to spread it out all over the city and try to address this through ADUs, or do they want it to be dense housing close to the transit corridor, close to train stations?
Right.
Is that more of what you're getting at? Because it doesn't do me a whole lot of good to hear that people don't like traffic, they don't want anybody else to come here.
So what you raise is a very good point, which is, if you ask these questions a certain way, what you will find out is that everybody likes their cake and eat it too, right? That if you don't introduce trade-offs, if you don't introduce competition, you're going to get the easy road on everything. And that doesn't help you as a council make tough decisions, right? And so very careful about structuring questions so that we're forcing people to understand and make decisions that are not the easy decisions, right? They're having to make decisions like what you just described. We're working with another city right now that's in a very similar situation in terms of their housing. They had, interestingly enough, had just gone through a general plan update process, and they were planning for a no-growth plan, which is going to get shattered here in a matter of a matter of months. And so now they're coming back and looking at this, and they realize, we have 10,000, 12,000 units we've got to put in our city, and where do they go? And so that's exactly the tough questions that you set it up that way, right?
Southern California, a coastal town that will remain nameless.
Possibly. So my point, it is well taken that there's an art to doing this, where we're making sure that we're not giving folks the way to just say, I want it all, right? And I don't want to have to pay any consequences.
That was my concern this afternoon. I talked to staff. I got a lot more comfortable, and the way you're answering my questions, I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
I'd like cake, cookies, and the current mayor to stay around forever. Oh, no, I didn't say that. Okay, Councilmember Bonilla.
I'd like to kind of pick up where Joe left off. I know that forming good questions is your specialty, and getting good results is what you really strive for. I think that you probably know we're in the middle of our general plan update process, right? And we have struggled somewhat with outreach and getting what the kind of participation we've been hoping for. And my opinion, I'm not speaking from other council members, is we haven't really got that much. So my thinking is that on some of these issues, probably a good number of the public aren't very well informed, right? So as long as we're agreed on the fact that all we're finding out is what the public knows on some of these things, I think that might be helpful to know, right? But I'm not sure about the real value of the responses to some questions if they don't understand it.
Well, I think there's two ways of looking at that. One is that, understanding where the community's opinions are, whether they're well-informed, misinformed, what have you, is nevertheless important, because part of your exercise moving forward is not just making decisions with your general plan, it's also communicating sort of the what and the why and the motivation behind this, and you have to explain, right? So you may find that there's an information gap that needs to be bridged, right, as you move forward with the general plan, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, depending on, and we haven't crafted any questions yet, but oftentimes when you get into sort of tough topics like this, we might lead out with, okay, I'm going to measure where community opinion is at right now, right? Just with an open up with a question about that's designed to sort of measure current opinion. But the survey then it starts into a little more discussion about if you knew this and what about that, right? And you're basically relaying some pieces of information that they may not know, right, in an effort to educate them a bit.
And does that change your opinion? Right.
And sometimes we take it from both sides, right? So some people say this, some people say that. So we're presenting sort of the discussion and debate that happens among people who are sort of in the know, right? And getting understanding is, okay, at the end of that process, where do they land? Right? Are they still where they were? Do they switch their mind set on this? And so, again, we haven't crafted any of the questions yet for this, but I'm familiar with when you get into these types of topics and you have individuals on both sides of this argument, you have to be very careful about how we structure these questions so that we're not getting the obvious answer this way or that way, right? My goal is not to lead anybody. My goal is to figure out where are they today, and perhaps as they learn more about this, where do they land?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Did you have any questions?
Yeah, a question I had is along the same lines. During the general plan process, I think we're generally finding that we have trouble reaching certain demographics, and I'm just curious to hear how you go about making sure that kind of all voices are heard, and is it like a weighting process? Do you use some sort of weighting of the results, and what happens when you have an address that you need to make sure that we're getting all of it and you can't reach that person?
So a couple thoughts. One of the reasons why, and we're one of the few firms that do this, we use mail, email, and phone, right? Because if you just use phone and you just use email, you can have as much as 20% of your residences effectively having zero probability of being selected at the sample, because even if you randomly sample them, all you have is an address, and that's not going to work for phone calls and email, right? And so we use 3 to make sure that we are giving every household a probability of being selected into the sample, which is ultimately the first and foremost. I mean, if you want to make sure that everyone's getting a chance, that's how you do it, right? The definition of a random, everyone knows that you have to use a random sample for doing these types of studies. Definition of a random sample is that every unit has an equal probability of being selected. And if you don't use the mail, you violate that right away, right? Also, though, we are able to layer these, and so that somebody who maybe doesn't respond to a mailed letter or doesn't respond to an email gets a phone call, right? So we're coming at them both ways. We are translating in Spanish. And then we also watch the demographics, right? So as we look at the community and we see how these results are coming in, we're watching to make sure that we're having the proper representation. There will always be some disparities between what ultimately comes in the door, right, and what you expect based on ACS data, that what the actual demographics of the community are. That's where weighting comes in, right? At the very end, you can use weighting to sort of fine tune that sample so that even though, let's say, you were a little heavy on, responses from females, for example, you can use weighting to adjust that so that that gender proportion is correct, right, on the final. What you don't want to do is just take what comes, it's wildly out of proportion, and use weighting to fix it, right? I see weighting as a fine-tune adjustment. It's not meant to make up for not doing proper sampling to begin with.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I follow up on that? I'm curious, how do you get the emails and the phone numbers?
So one of the things that has changed in the last 5 years is the amazing ability to link emails to names and addresses. It used to be when online surveys have been around for a long time, but the big knock on them was, well, how do you drive traffic, right, in a way that is statistically reliable, because nobody has a master database of emails. Well, there are companies that's all they do, right, is collect data and link this together. There's also public records that you can have access to. So it's a combination of public and private records that we will match on to be able to pull that off. We won't have them on everybody, don't get me wrong, but we have them on a large percentage.
Okay, thank you.
So one quick question. How long do you think the survey will be? I know you haven't come up with all the questions yet.
We haven't. So typically, we like to keep it at, if it's on the phone, right, 15 to 17 minutes is sort of your max, right? I have some that I do with communities that are 20, 22 minutes. What you find is that once they're in the interview and they realize it's about their community, they stay on, right? It's their chance to weigh in. I mean, if I called and said, I want to talk to you about insurance, I got about 30 seconds, right? Okay. When it's about the city, and it becomes very obvious early on that this is about the city, it's about their community, and the questions are relevant, they don't have a problem staying on. The online version goes faster because you're not having to wait for someone to read it to you. You get to read it yourself. There's just, it flows so that a 15-minute telephone survey is probably like a 10-minute online survey.
So it is that if you reach somebody by the mail, then you give them the opportunity to answer either online or by phone. If you reach somebody by phone, you're going to do it right there. And if somebody gets an email from you, it will happen right there.
Right. And so everybody can do it either way, but what we tend to find is your mailed invitation, 90% of them are going to go online, right? And 10% will sort of say, hey, I want to take it by phone. Mm-hmm. Email is almost all online, right? Because it's so easy to click and you're there. And phone tends to stay phone.
Okay. And then you'll work with staff on content and questions and format and all that stuff.
The way it works with this process is, what I like to do is understand the topics of interest, mm-hmm. right? And then I go back and write the questions, right? And we come back and review them. It's not a matter of me sitting down as a group and wordsmithing these things with everybody, because I find that at the end of the day, that process, A, takes a ton longer, and B, doesn't wind up with as crisp a product at the end. I mean, it's more important, since I have all that experience and expertise doing this, that I just figure out what the topics are we're going to address, and then I'll go back and write the questionnaire.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions? And we already have authorization for this, so this was just an update, right? Okay. Do we have any public comment?
No.
No public comment?
Thank you guys for your time.
One person raising their hand for public comment. Come on down, Maxine.
Maxine Turner, quick question. Really happy to hear about the survey, but will the council, the general plan subcommittee, or the public be able to see what the questions are? Because you're going to be making judgments on how to lead people to get more detailed information and to educate them. And frankly, I have concerns that, you know, the leading is truly non-biased and open. So will there be a chance for public review of the questions before the survey goes out, and council review also?
Okay.
That's my question. Thank you.
Any other public comment? We have another gentleman here. Okay, please. If you could state your name before you
My
start.
name is Kareem Saroff, San Mateo resident. Can you increase the sample size?
We're not going to answer right on spot, but
Okay.
we'll get you answers.
Okay, and then from what I understand, volunteer samples are accepted, right? Those are the only questions I have.
And the second one was a question as well, sir?
Correct. It was volunteer samples are accepted, yes?
Okay. Okay. Any other public comment? All right, so we'll go ahead and close public comment. I'm going to ask our city manager how he feels about the public input on forming the questions, and then the changing the sample size and volunteering the sample size will probably go to the doc over here. Okay, go.
So the plan was not to review the questions with the community. I think that will be sort of defeat the purpose, I think, of using a consultant. I mean, he's the expert.
The topics will
in-
be coming from the public, if I may interrupt you for one moment. Topically, we know what's coming from the public. The wordsmithing would not come from the public. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay.
If I may weigh in one other thing, having done this a lot, if we were to release the questionnaire in advance of data collection, that is inviting lots of problems, right? And what inevitably happens is, whether well-meaning or not so well-meaning, you'll have individuals who take the questionnaire, they'll blast it out to their friends, say, here's the questionnaire. By the way, here's how you answer the questions, and make sure you're waiting by your phone, this and that. It has a our goal is to get a statistically reliable gauge of what the community is thinking, and the problem is by doing that, you open the door to muddying those waters in a big way.
It becomes less pure in a way.
Absolutely, and I've seen it. I've seen those efforts happen, right? And so part of the reason why it's important that if at the end of the day we want to be able to trust the results on the back end, we need to respect the process on the front end, and that is in part making sure that although I'll understand what the topics are, that you want to rely on somebody like me to design it, because there's a way of doing it the correct way, and there's lots of ways to get it wrong. Right.
So the neutrality will come from you, not from the council, not from the public, not from staff. It is the topics will be processed, as it were, and then the neutrality and the questioning comes from your talent.
And part of when you hire somebody like me, you could design a study certainly to tilt it one way or tilt it the other, right? That's not hard to do. The challenge is to ride down the middle and make sure you're getting, both a valid and a reliable gauge of what that underlying opinion or construct is. I've got 20 plus years of experience designing studies to do just that, right? And so, I don't pretend to know your community as well as the residents do, or you do as council or staff, but that's why we engage in this process where I learn more about your community and I learn about the topics, but then I go back and write it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have anything else you wanted to add? I didn't want to cut you off. I did interrupt. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add, something came in from a resident inquiring about the incorporation of recreation facilities into the survey, and I just wanted to note that since Parks and Recreation is such a large component of the community services that we provide, we will incorporate, that would be incorporated anyways, and we'll make sure the facilities component is in there as well.
Topically, sure.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about a bigger swath of survey and or volunteer. Volunteer, I think I know
So
where
let me
you're
take the
headed.
volunteer part first. again, what allows you with a sample of 400 or 500 or 600 to know with a certain degree of statistical reliability what the entire community is thinking is the fact that that sample is done in a random manner, right? The problem with volunteer contributions and I want to take the survey, people signing up, is you are no longer following a random selection process. You're getting what's called self-selected sample. And that could boost your sample size just by taking in more interviews, but what it does is it skews your sample in a way that you at that point can no longer project with a certain reliability to what the entire community thinks, right? It introduces unknown bias, right? And so that's, at the end of the day, it'd be much better off having even 400 interviews selected at random, right, than I would having 10,000 interviews that were collected in something other than a random way, right? Through volunteers or self-selection or going down to the grocery store or what have you. And so I would advise against that because it's just going to muddy the waters again. And then as far as sample size goes, because we get this question a lot. I mean, 600 interviews doesn't seem like a lot for 85,000 adults. But again, I mean, the beautiful thing about inferential statistics is it's not how many you have as it is how you choose the ones that you've chosen that allows you to project with that known degree of reliability. The margin of error also is not a line, it's a curve. And what happens is, that's why you used to see a lot of surveys where you always see 400, right? The sample size is 400, sample size is 400. Because if you've got the margin of error from 0 going up here and you've got your sample size going out this way, it's this curve where at 400, you get to meet the academic standard for statistical reliability. You can be 95% confident that your results are within plus or minus about 4.9% of what we would have found overall. As you start to add sample, you're adding cost, right? But your margin of error, really, the margin of error improvements start flattening out such that from 400 to 600, we go from 4.9 to 4, right? Let's say we double to 1,200. You're only about 2.8. So you've only bought yourself about 1 point in terms of overall reduction in margin of error, right? But you've now doubled the cost for your sample, right, and your data collection. And so the cost-benefit analysis tends to work against adding more sample for that reason.
Any other questions? All righty, and we've heard from public comment, and so...
Sorry, just one more comment is just to reiterate what Samantha mentioned right off the bat, which is this is something that we haven't done before, and this will establish a baseline for us and won't preclude us looking at the results and saying we want to study something else or look at something else more closely. So I think that's important to note at this point.
And to do some follow-up. I know Councilmember Rodriguez is always like, how are you gauging how well you're doing? And it may be that this is our baseline and we follow up to see how well we did do. Okay, so yes, certainly.
Well, I just, a little bit more on that too is, I wonder, in terms of following up, one of the kind of the issue that always comes up is because whenever we're trying to gauge public opinion, we don't have all these tons of dollars to do a formal survey every time we want to know, like, for example, how people feel about scooters or something. So a lot of times we fall back on online surveys. And there might be directionally correct, maybe. There's, I think, some disagreements all across the board on like how useful they are or not. And I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on those? And is there any way to make them better, like for follow-up, so we can try to utilize it as a low-cost option to get public opinion?
So I think those can be useful in sort of topical questions like what you have. What those tend to be is a measure of passion, meaning, and that matters, right? Passion matters, right? People who care enough to go and sort of weigh in on those topics, or show up at council meetings or show up at community meetings. They also tend to not necessarily represent the average resident because, the average resident doesn't care passionately enough about that issue to show up, right? And so I think as a measure of passion and as maybe directional, they work. The reality is, though, you can't escape the fact that a proper random sample is the foundation of any research project when you're trying to make inferences from a smaller sample to a larger group, right? And if it's kind of like building a house, if you don't get the foundation right, doesn't matter how nice you build the rest of the house, it's going to fall over, right? And so it's really important that you make sure you maintain the integrity of that sample. That's where I think those, quick sort of, let's do a Survey Monkey thing, or let's post something on the city's website, tell us what you think. They tend to be a little more, again, a measure of passion, so to speak, and the people who care enough to go do it than it is necessarily a representative sample of or representation of your entire community things. Thanks. Yep.
I was just going to comment that I think this is a really positive thing that we're doing, because I know in the past I've had concerns about survey results and whether they've been skewed or there's some bias. So I really like the fact you're doing password protected, and I appreciate the fact you're also going with open-ended questions, because I think that's really how you get to the heart of how people feel. When you give them A, B, C, or D, you're really not getting to what someone truly feels. So I think there's so much value in this kind of survey for the city, and especially the opportunity to have it as a baseline moving into the future. So just very excited to see it happening.
Great.
Yeah, I concur. Thank you very much for
Thank
the
you.
update. It's very enlightening, and to be further enlightened. Thank you. Okay, so we have no more agenda items. I did have one item that I would like to ask if the council would be interested in taking up at a future date. It is a program called United We Stand Against Hate, and other cities are adopting it as well. It'll be a 1 week in November, and so I'd like to know if we could discuss it next time to see if our city would like to participate by way of really adopting a resolution, and there may be some additional activities about it. Did you have something you wanted to add on that?
No, I just said we've got a sample resolution and can easily accommodate that if council would like to.
Excellent. So is there some agreement to at least take it up at our next meeting?
Yes.
Your last meeting? Okay, good. All right, so that's what I had, and I think any other reports and announcements before? I'm going to turn over to Deputy Mayor Fresket, but anybody? Yes, okay. Drew.
Just briefly would like to acknowledge Patrice Olds, our city clerk. Patrice just took over as the elected president of the City Clerks Association of California, and just took over this past weekend. So,
go get him, Patrice. Set high standards. We know it's a lot of work, but we're really proud of you for that prestige and effort. Anybody else? I think Councilmember Bonilla had a couple items.
So I'm very proud to be able to announce that also, while she is being sworn in, I will be there at the California League of California Cities, and I will be doing the swearing in.
Yes,
So,
I saw that. Thank you, sir, for those services.
So thank you. And also, one other thing, I'm also going to be in Redondo Beach at the Cal CCA annual conference, which CCA is what PCE is, Peninsula Clean Energy. So it's an annual conference, and I'll be speaking as part of a panel there about achieving climate goals through innovation and collaboration. So
excellent.
I'm proud to represent San Mateo there doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speaking engagements? I'm kidding.
There was one other thing I can't remember.
We'll be playing
right
all
now.
week.
Oh, yes, one more. Not a speaking engagement, but like you, I have something that I was asked to carry forth and ask if we could look at it. And I didn't copy and bring it with me, but it's the carbon fee and rebate legislation that's in Congress now. I was asked by the Citizen Climate Lobby if we could express support for it in a letter.
Okay.
So we can either, I don't know, do we need to actually have that agendized, or?
Could we have a draft letter put on the? Could we have a draft letter put on the consent calendar, or how do you want to? We could do that. Okay. If you have a draft letter,
yeah, right, we'll do that.
We'll get it on the next agenda.
Yes,
excellent.
Thank you.
Before you have an announcement too?
Yeah, just that I attended my last San Mateo County Transportation Authority Board meeting. last week. But one of the items we had was a presentation on the updates that are going to be made at the Highway 101 and 92 interchange, as well as Hillsdale Boulevard. So it's exciting that those are moving forward because they're going to be traffic mitigations to help move the flow of traffic and help deter some of the backups we're seeing. But one good thing I learned, which I've shared with Drew and I think staff may have known about, but we have an opportunity when they're doing the work, especially at Hillsdale Boulevard, to put in for funding for our pedestrian and bicycle bridge. So there's a variety of different grants we can go for, but as long as there is work being done at a location, that's another grant opportunity. So we need to keep on top of that one to help us get that funded.
Okay, great. So it's a little double whammy there. Any other reports, announcements? Going once, going twice? Okay, so we have Deputy Mayor Feskett is going to adjourn in one of our community members who's passed.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I want to adjourn tonight in memory of Robert Joel Bianchi, who passed away peacefully on Tuesday, September 17th, at the age of 81. And he is survived by his loving wife of 51 years, Joanne, 3 devoted children, Teddy, Bobby, and Carla, and 11 adoring grandchildren who were proud to call him Nono. Bob was born and raised in San Francisco, the son of Carl and Amelia Bianchi, and he grew up in the Marina District. After serving in the Navy in his early years, he worked for the Sunset Scavengers and later for DeVincenzi Trucking. He moved to San Mateo in 1975 and started Bianchi Railroad Company by purchasing the train at Central Park in San Mateo, which he operated for 37 years. So thanks to Bob, thousands of children, including my daughters and grandson, enjoyed the thrill of train rides in Central Park. He was a longtime member of the San Mateo Elks Club and a devoted usher at St. Matthew's Catholic Church for many years. He left a lasting impression with everyone he met. He was truly a one-of-a-kind person with a loud and boisterous personality. However, it was his loving and generous soul that spoke the loudest in the community, and he will be deeply missed by all those who knew him. I did not know Bob personally, but I want to acknowledge him for his many contributions to our community over the years, and especially for bringing such happiness to so many children and families who had the pleasure of riding the Central Park train. You know, that train was around when I was a kid, so I'm very grateful to him for purchasing and continuing to provide that beloved service for 37 years. On behalf of the City Council of San Mateo, I'd like to extend our sincere condolences to his family.
Okay, so we'll have a moment of silence. And that's it. We stand adjourned.
No closed session?